Hello, everyone. This is Belinda Carr, and you're listening to my podcast on building products and technology. As we know, the construction industry is ripe for disruption and automation. It has been reliant on manual labor and outdated tech for far too long, which has led to lagging productivity. Every week, I chat with a company that is exploring ways to tackle these issues. Today, I'm speaking with Tim Seims, real estate developer and researcher of modular construction. Thanks for joining us, Tim.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you, especially considering your thought leadership in this space. And these are the sort of connections that need to happen, for our industry to get better. And so, thanks for all you do, and thanks for doing this podcast and for having me on today.
Thank you. That's very, very kind of you. We recently connected through LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been a wonderful resource to me
Yes.
reaching out to the construction industry and real estate developers like yourself, people outside the DIY space, like the YouTube space. And we have a lot of similarities in where our careers are heading right now. I've kind of entered the prefab industry and the modular industry, and you have been in that space for quite a while. You are very, very knowledgeable, and you run your own company right now where you act as a consultant for different modular building companies. Uh, Before we dive into that in your business, let's talk about you. How did you get into the construction field? And maybe even dive in deeper, how did you get into the modular field?
Yeah. Thanks for great question. And I think it's important for us to dive deep. And a lot of times our past tells a lot about what, informs a lot of what we're doing right now, and then also where we're headed. And I think one of my favorite things is, and now my dad and I can laugh about it, is when he was in construction when I was a teenager and young. And it was always a struggle for our family. And I was like, oh man, I'm never going to be in construction. And this is so boring. And you're always, dad's always coming home dirty and tired, and all these things. I don't want to do anything to do with that, and then there were a couple of things that happened. There was an older gal that was friends of the family that had rheumatoid arthritis, and she did woodworking, and she couldn't do it anymore. So she hired me to help her, and so she would instruct me how to do, refinish the furniture or rebuild it or repair it or whatever. So that was pretty interesting, 13, 14 years old. And
That was your
then I
first
went
hands-on experience.
yeah, exactly. I mean, my dad was always trying to get us to do different things. We had 6 kids in the family, and he was always, we were always tinkering with things with him. And that was my first, like, quote unquote professional experience in construction. Before that, I was kind of mowing lawns and doing odd jobs. And then I went to work for a company called Birch Equipment while in high school, and it was all heavy construction equipment that was out for rent. And then we'd come back and I would clean it. So I got to kind of play with the equipment. Even I think broke a few things along the way, but they were really patient with me and showed me, how to operate it and clean it and maintain it, which was really great. But the real catalyst was there was a project in Hawaii. I would have never considered going there, honestly, at that age. But I was 18, and I got invited by my uncle to go help with disaster relief in Hawaii after Hurricane Iniki in 1991. And so it was really an interesting time. I guess maybe I was 19 by that point. And by the time I went, and it opened my eyes to kind of the transformation that you can make very quickly with good construction, great construction techniques and crews. And you could, drive down the street and see something you accomplished. And I found that very rewarding.
Satisfying, rewarding.
Yeah, exactly. And
Was there
even though
also the other added benefit of you helping people that were in desperate need because they had been affected and their lives had been uprooted?
right, it kind of brought to life. It's sort of like a dormant skill or dormant need or something like that, because I took shop class in school and home ec, so I could cook and bake when I was on my own. But I did take shop class, but I didn't really care about it that much. But here was this kind of, bringing it to real life with real people that were devastated and waiting, didn't have water, didn't have a roof, different things like that. So that would really open my eyes to the benefit of having those skills. I didn't really understand the commercial value of that until much later, but that was kind of the first big story in my life that I tie my love of construction to now.
And then you had a very interesting career after that. You worked at several different firms, a Japanese firm too, and you worked at all different. You've been diving into different aspects of construction before you got into
Kind of all
modular
over
field.
the place. Yeah, yeah. It's one of the big things that happened was I started to do really well in construction, and then I got hired by a lumberyard to be in outside sales, and then I ended up doing a lot more work with fiber cement siding. So then I got recruited by James Hardy to work with them. Learned a ton about go-to-market strategy and product development there at James Hardy. Had a great boss. And then after that, I went to work at a company called Nichiha, which is what you brought up, a Japanese company. And the interesting thing about a Japanese company is there's a lot of cultural nuance there, but there was this really big, there was also, which I enjoyed the cultural nuance, there was also this piece of modular. You know, they had this great experience and depth of knowledge with modular construction in Japan because it's just much more common there. And so that really opened my eyes to the opportunity. I thought, well, how portable are these things to the United States, North America? And so I got to go over to Japan, tour some factories, talk to folks that were involved in prefabrication there. And then we really started to dive in as a company,
And this was
which I
really early on, right? In 2010 or so?
Oh, yeah. So really early on, 2010 is when I started Nichiha. And then not long after that, I started working in the hospitality space a lot. And then I started to see, that's where you see a lot of modular compared to other segments. And then I started to see the alignment: hospitality, modular, Japan, Nichiha. So then they let me start up something. We just called it the Modular Offsite Division. And so I really worked with a lot of architects, DFMA architects and firms and developers and hospitality brands, Starbucks, different ones that were really either deep in the modular offsite prefab space or wanted to be deep in that space. And so we all kind of rolled up our sleeves together and worked on solutions that was really, really fun.
So that's a lot of hands-on experience. Like you had a different kind of construction experience, then you went into marketing, and then this job came along that kind of pulled you into the modular space. I doubt that you thought that your career would go down this path. You might have, I'm not sure. Did you think that you would?
No clue. No.
No, not at all.
No. I don't know if you like. There's this movie called Bug's Life, and in it, there's see a need, fill a need, which is a very basic concept when we watch it with them when the kids were little. And I would see a need, and then I would make a pitch, especially at Nichiha, very good culture for internal entrepreneurs, I call it, which I think we need to really cultivate people like that. And it really gave me an opportunity, a platform, very supportive management in making these new divisions, these new products, these new lines come together to meet a need in the market. And that was, without that kind of support, it probably I wouldn't have been working on those sort of things.
So you said when you started off in the modular space at Nichiha, they were mainly focused on hospitality. You mean like larger hotels and larger projects, not just a Starbucks? Is Starbucks an industry that you identified with potential to like turn that building into a modular building?
Well, nowadays, and looking back, I a lot of times I see things and I go, well, that could be modular. That could be modular. In fact, for a while, I used it as a hashtag. That should be modular. And so some of these buildings just kind of lend themselves to that kind of mode. But originally, I started actually out in a residential there, and then ended up in commercial. And then there's a group there called the National Brands team, and they work directly with brands like Hilton and Marriott and Starbucks and all these different global or national brands in order to help them develop prototypes and then go to market with rollout. And so that was really my first exposure, Belinda, with something programmatic, where it was a repeat of the same thing over and over again, which then you automatically think, okay, this should be prefab, this should be modular. And so it was just kind of a confluence. So by 2015, 2016, we kind of had a plan that's still in place, that's still being executed to make sure that there's a place for a way to do those products on a modular or prefabricated type scenario. And I think that building product manufacturers should really be looking at that, and developers should really be working with building product manufacturers to come up with solutions. Even if their product isn't installed in the factory, it's still, if it's installed on site, you still need different kind of detailing, and the mate lines and plate lines and all those things need a lot of attention for a lot of reasons.
So you have talked to so many companies in the modular space, and obviously clients too. What's the big hurdle? I'm sure there are lots of hurdles, but the big hurdle that you see in kind of educating clients on the importance of adopting modular construction? What's the hesitation?
Well, I think, you could say it's easy to say it's mindset, but really every product has to go through an adoption, natural progression.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
painful and messy, and people are
exactly. So you have
expensive.
your visionaries, and you have your early adopters, and then you have your early majority, and there's certain things that have to make that happen. For instance, when you look at different things like glulam beams or engineered wood products, those things were moving very slowly until there was a resin breakthrough to make something that was weather resistant, so that those products wouldn't have to be completely covered during construction to keep them dry. So that was a huge catalyst, and it was able to be used. Now it's very ubiquitous. And so everything needs a catalyst, and it needs a progression of credibility. So you need all those case studies, you need all the documentation and testing and all those things, so that there's a high level of trust. Even if a lot of these modes have been around for a long time, like wood frame volumetric, it still hasn't really progressed beyond a very fractional percentage of the market share, especially in residential. So what will it take to get there is the adoption of certain code aspects, the way that capital is structured, because one of the big challenges is, in order to get something made modular, oftentimes, almost all the time, the developer has to prepay for everything before it even leaves the factory. So you might have, $3 or $4 million sitting out there before anything reaches the job site. So that's the financing is the challenge. But fortunately, there are new financial vehicles and other things like that being innovated to make room to add and give lift to modular and offsite. And I think it's really making a difference. The new ICC code that a Modular Building Institute collaborated on, that's another thing, that's a templatized code book to really help developers and architects and code officials get their arms around prescriptive construction for modular applications. Those are some of the things that have held back the industry. And the some things that are helping it is this kind of maybe change in how the capital stack is structured. There's a change in that adoption and of code and the ability to do in-factory third-party inspections and kind of more acceptance of that, especially during COVID. So that COVID actually helped that.
I was just going to say that. I mean, as bad as and as painful as the last 2 years have been for the construction industry, it has encouraged them to look at alternatives and start taking more risks and seeing what else is out there, and them realizing that we can't keep doing things the same way. Something has to change, because the whole system was so fragile. And I feel like everyone is suddenly accepting of modular, accepting of new materials and new ways of building. And you've probably seen that too.
Yes, I have seen that. And another thing that speaks to the viability of the space is there's a lot of consolidation, M&A funding, innovation funds being set up, not only by factories and institutional investors, but also strategics like major national building materials brands are taking a strategic position, whether it's since a debt round or even equity or convertible financial means, that they are investing in generative design, factories, all the sort of things that have to go to help us get from these little incremental changes to a step change to a sea change in the built environment.
And it's people with the money that have finally started seeing value in all this stuff and seeing because obviously the return on investment is one of their major concerns. And they are finally starting to see the potential in it and starting to see a good return on investment in the long run, which is why they're throwing money into the space right now. But the last time we spoke, and you brought up a very important point about knowledge sharing within the industry. There's so much going on right now, so much excitement, so much innovation. But you have noticed that there isn't a lot of sharing of knowledge within, like amongst developers, amongst modular builders.
Yeah, I think that probably 3 or 4 years ago, it was even tighter than it is right now. And what I'm noticing is now, just in the last couple months, I've noticed this, where we're seeing more and more openness. For instance, we're seeing a collaboration of, say, a logistics firm, a set and stitch firm, a factory, an architect, or an engineering and marketing firms, all basically creating a suite for delivery of these projects. They're going much more integrated, because one of the challenges in the industry is a lot of folks believed, or maybe they did have some sort of secret sauce, but generally there isn't a lot of secret sauce in construction. A lot of them believe that I can't have people here because it might, they might steal my idea or whatever. And we've seen a lot of that, and we see it even in just site built construction, but especially when you're dealing with the manufactured product. I understand you feel like you have something special because you have all these people working there. You've invested all this money. You have this building. You have all these trucks. But nothing is really that secret. So what's needed in the industry is more of that sharing, and not, like you said, the knowledge transfer between factories, but definitely amongst manufacturers of building components that go into these sub-assemblies or these bulk assemblies, or all of it together, with the developer, to really find out what the problems are, to solve for those things, and to make the experience better. Because not every job that just because it's done modular goes well. In fact, It's been well documented that the last few years there's been some trouble. So some challenging, modular builds that have actually taken longer than site builds and stuff like that. So it's not a cure-all. What helps it become more of a solution is when more people are working on it better together. And when more people that are unrelated companies come together to solve a problem, it's kind of amazing. So what I've noticed lately is a lot of times clients will ask me to take them, say, can you introduce us to factories? Can you take us to modular job sites? We're trying to get to know the space. These are building product manufacturers. And really in the last year, there's been more of a welcoming. Yes, please come check out our factory. Please.
They're opening their doors to you.
Exactly. And it's not just me. I think a lot of it has to do with people like podcasts like this, Dave Cooper, Audrey Grubesic, people that are basically showcasing what's inside these factories. So now it's kind of like all bets are off because everyone's seen it already. So why not just come visit? Why not get ideas? Why not roll up our sleeves and work on these, flashing detail problems that we're having, or set and stitch, the mate lines on these certain kinds of job sites when you're dealing with steel construction. All those things can be solved, but if one person has a less chance of doing it than multiple people that are experts.
So you kind of touched on it already. Over the last 2 years, you have started your own company, and you are advising different clients on ways to build better. And one of the things you do is kind of take them to different modular factories around the States. And is knowledge sharing and education the primary role that you're in right now?
Yeah, I thought I would be doing actually more, say, market size reports or go-to-market strategy and stuff like that, which I love to do. What I found is that the real need is for the belly-to-belly, gritty, deep dive conversations where the manufacturer or the developer and the architect, the engineer, the building envelope engineer, the factory foreman and the woman who, you know, directs everything on the floor in terms of waterproofing, or, you know, whatever the case is, all of them are in the same room talking about these things. I never thought I would be coordinating stuff like that. But number one, that's what I'm doing. And number two, it's fun. And number three, people are willing to do it. And I think maybe if I was to do that, you know, if I were to do that 3 years ago or 4 years ago, it might have been a lot harder to get people together like that in the factory environment or on the job site.
So do you reach out to companies or do they approach you when they are interested in modular construction?
Yeah, it's mostly outreach, and LinkedIn's been pretty instrumental with that. And so people will see just some of the stuff I work on, and then they'll just send me a message, and that's how these relationships have started. And I think there's a need for that. I gave maybe like 4 years ago, Advancing Prefab in Dallas. I presented and talked about how, you know, companies A, B, and C told me initially, yes, let's get everyone in the same room. We'll roll up our sleeves and we'll solve problems together. And I was like, great, that's exactly what we want. And then I never could get people together. And so I was just like, do people really want innovation, or are they just kind of in their own world? Well, I think they really want innovation. Now it's a really great time to get people together, to connect. And I guess that's not the role I started out to do, but it's what people need, and I'm having fun doing it.
So in addition to modular construction, you've also been diving into mass timber, engineered wood. How close of a role does that play with offsite modular construction, in your opinion?
It's pretty huge, and I think we need to, at least I try to remind myself, that mass timber is a fairly established technology. Perhaps the applications are what have changed. So, you know, glue lams, engineered wood products. I'll give you an example. Chase Banks, on several hundred of their banks, they use a glue lam, which we would normally use vertically as a beam, right? They use glued laminated timbers, flat, 4-foot panels, 60 feet long, on the roofs of their banks. They were kind of a shed roof, modern design. And that was just a glue lam, you know, and that can be, engineers have no problem with sizing those. And then of course the factories have no problem with making those. They're pretty easy to ship, very established technology. What we're seeing is a difference in the applications. Number one, we're seeing a lot more use as floor panels and roof panels and wall panels. And that each one of those has to be engineered for the building and the application, which is one of the roadblocks or one of the constraints. And then the other thing we're seeing some of is a little bit dabbling in single family construction, which I think is where the market has to go. Just like glue lams, engineered wood products would be much smaller if they hadn't gained huge adoption in residential construction. So what needs to happen with that to make it really draw it forward is some sort of universal span tables, just like we've done with engineered wood products. You know, 90% of the time with glue lams or engineered wood products, the person at a lumberyard counter can size them out of a catalog, no problem. And they don't necessarily have to go through any kind of like one-off engineering. Once mass timber gets to that point for wall and floor panels, then it can start to be, and I think the easiest place to do that is in single family or townhome type construction. Then
you have an interest. I'm sorry, but you have an interesting theory about that. What you just mentioned. You said that once you see adoption by the single family home industry, that's when it proves that you can see its value, or it's proven that it's a worthy product with a lot of potential. Why is that? Is it just the scale, the number of homes that we build, number of single family homes that we build?
Yeah, and I know the ratio is going to change over the next couple of years, the ratio of residential construction spending to commercial industrial. But residential is always larger. And most products in the commercial world get kind of mired around the 3 to 5% market share, kind of max out with that. And it's because the competition level is just a lot different. And the budgets are bigger they're much more per square foot in commercial. When you get to single family, things that what you're competing with is a lot more. So if you can break into this, if your product category can break into single family, then you know it has that, like you said, that value because now it's
Budgets are tighter, and
right.
you have to prove it on a very much larger scale than you would at commercial. That's very
Right.
interesting.
Because that's part of crossing the chasm to that early majority is you have to get some, maybe not price, but combined cost compression and another catalyst to really make it to that early majority. And when you can do that in single family, it's a bigger market. It's also smaller format. So in commercial, a lot of times you need much larger format products. So you can actually it can be a really interesting market for what previously was viewed as a commercial assembly or product going into single family residential. We've seen that work really well over the last 30 or 40 years with certain products. It has to get to the point where any product category coming into residential has to get to the point where it's fairly prescriptive.
Mm-hmm.
And until it's prescriptive, the only thing in mass timber that is prescriptive is if you were to do a nail laminated timber, because it's just a standard nailing pattern. As soon as you start introducing adhesive, glues and resins and stuff like that, then you have a lot different challenges. CLT, dowel laminated timber, and well, I guess those two would be the biggest ones that need to be engineered pretty much for every project.
So based on your research and the people you've talked to, do you see a timeline to mass adoption of modular construction and mass timber by the residential or single family home industry?
I do. So I do have a viewpoint on that. One thing I have to always remind myself too, and I find myself maybe talking too much about, but all of these are just building products. Whether it's just a widget, that's all it is, and it has to go through the kind of normal progression. And typically, terminal market share with building materials is probably between like 13 to 15%. Some products really are overachievers. Like, James Hardy is closer to 20% market share, probably approaching terminal for them. So we're talking mass market adoption. We're talking 13 to 15% market share. And sometimes you have to look at more at spending than square footage. But I can see it getting to that point in 10 years. I don't know how it would get there sooner. Just because in order to go through and get all the, say, span tables uniform and approved, and then there's some fire, of course, with single family residential, you don't have all the fire testing challenges. But you have to jump a few hurdles. And then we need a lot more capacity to meet what would be needed in residential. So we probably need 20 more plants to be able to get to that point, or 10 huge ones to be able to get to the point where we could get costs low enough to attack the market and then have enough to supply it.
So speaking of suppliers, do you see yourself using all your knowledge, or all this knowledge you've gained throughout your career, towards becoming a supplier, setting up your own factory, either a mass timber factory or a modular construction factory, setting up something like that in the States?
I do. I really love helping clients. I find this need, however, to build something. I started out as a builder. I love to have my tool bags on. I love real estate development. I love building homes. Of course, we need a lot more of the right kind of housing. We probably have enough bedrooms in the US, but we don't have enough of the right housing. So what I'd love to be able to do is to still have my tool bags on, or work on projects and be a builder again. And I'm working on a few things that could lead to that right now. And it's exciting because a lot of folks talk about things, but they aren't able to be in a position where they can actually build a physical product or something like that. So I'm hoping to be able to, if I get the ability to do that, I hope I can honor it and do something great.
That's very exciting. Well, I hope we meet in person sometime soon, and maybe even tour some modular factories around the States, maybe abroad too, and produce some content to share on YouTube and LinkedIn and other social media channels, because I think there's so much potential in the modular offsite prefab industry. Everyone is like, everyone's diving in so deep, and they're so passionate. I meet so many passionate people in this industry that can really help make a difference. And I would love to share their stories, learn from them, and just help them gain more recognition.
I think what you're doing is great, sharing those stories, because we just a lot of times one of the challenges in the industry is just straight up awareness, and then also to have the teaming up of you and DPR, and you have your great knowledge, and then they have this platform of construction, and I think those coming together, because okay, I'm not only talking about it, but we're also doing it,
Yeah.
and I think I'm one of the talkers, I guess, but we just need more doers. So to have that combination, I think is great, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that sort of collaboration in the future. And I'm super happy. Super happy about
you
that.
kind of touched on it. I absolutely love building the YouTube. I love building the YouTube channel. The journey has been wonderful, but I've been missing that hands-on experience, that me actually feeling like I'm making a difference in the real world. I'm able to share knowledge, kind of like you, through the podcast, through the videos, but I'm waiting for I'm trying to get to the next step.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this seems like a natural progression, and we're both kind of working on it. And I think that no matter what, as long as we're all trying to make the industry stronger, even if it's not very much from our own viewpoint together, it adds up to a lot.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for sharing all that information with us. And like I said, hope to meet you and collaborate on some other videos pretty soon.
Oh, it's going to happen. I look forward to it too.
All right. Thanks, Tim.